All right, funnel optimization. What is funnel optimization? Some people refer to it as conversion rate optimization or CRO. It's basically thinking of the onboarding process for your customers or your leads as a funnel. So it's a series of steps that you want people to go through. At each step there is drop-off. And funnel optimization is the process through which you minimize that drop-off, essentially. So, let's see. Oh, okay. You already know about me. My name's Andrei, if you guys didn't catch it in previous session. Also, a few of you asked about how to get in touch with me. So my email address is Andrei, ANDREI @500.co, if you want to email me. So funnel optimization, how do you actually do it? A/B testing is the tactic that you generally employ for funnel optimization. A/B testing is where you are running an experiment on your website and you have a hypothesis that you have two variants, right? Like two competing designs, and you feel that one of them is going to outperform the other, right? So you have variant 1 and variant 2. You run them against each other versus your site traffic, and you see which one converts better. So some of you may say, well, why do we need to do A/B testing? Why do we need to do funnel optimization? We can just intuit this stuff. Okay, you can't intuit it. Even the people who are so-called experts at it, people who do nothing but funnel optimization day in and day out and have been doing it for decades, are still relatively close to random chance in terms of predicting what works and what doesn't. So let's do a quick hands-on experiment. Here is a screenshot of a site called a Wayfind. So this is an actual A/B test that was run on the site. I'm going to show you the two variants. We'll flip back and forth, and then we're going to see which one you guys all think did better. So this is version A. Take a quick look at it, okay? This is version B. Can you tell the difference? Okay. So this is going to be just like going to the eye doctor, you guys, okay? Better or worse? Better or worse? What is the letter? Okay, so obviously the main differences are in the headline and the supporting text, okay? So what do you guys think? Which one outperformed on a click-through basis, conversion basis? Okay, show of hands. Version A? Okay. Version B? Okay. And the answer is version B. Woo! Completed trial submissions by almost 40% more. Really? This is 40% better. Okay. Why? Okay, so some reasons. The one-line headline. People don't like to read. People, hello. One-line headline. Subheadline. Okay, so here they have 3 layers of text. Here they only have 2. And then tweaked copy. So some really subtle differences between, let's see. A Wayfind will notify you via your mobile device, a voice call IM, right? Will notify you on your mobile device with an SMS. IM, SMS, right? So really subtle differences, but this is what A/B testing comes down to, right? Like it's impossible, literally, for you to put yourself in the same frame of mind as your customers, right? So anything that you think may work or not work, you need to test in a rigorous and statistically significant fashion, hence A/B testing, which we'll talk a little bit more about here, but fundamentally I'm going to be talking about bigger picture conversion rate optimization stuff. So what is this funnel optimization, conversion rate optimization business? It is basically finding the way to get as many of your leads to take your intended action as possible. Okay, get them across that goal line. And why do we care about CRO? Because your funnel is actually a sieve, right? So you are losing more than 90%, and that's being kind. For most businesses, you're losing probably close to 90, like over 95% of people or of your leads going through your funnel, right? And you suck at guessing what's effective because everybody does. And the other important thing that's relevant here is that small improvements can make a material impact on your revenue and your customer acquisition cost. We were talking about that earlier. Let me give you guys an example. Let's call this a hypothetical example in the e-commerce space. So let's say you are selling some really cool shit online and your website is converting on those sales at below 1%. And you come to me and you say, Andre, I want to do paid acquisition. I want to go out there. I want to start spending tens of thousands of dollars on Facebook ads right now. What do you think I'm going to say?
No.
No. Why?
Not converting.
Yeah, it's not converting. You're converting at less than 1%. The industry average, which is, I would take with a large grain of salt, for e-commerce is in the 3 to 5% range, roughly, okay? So think about that. Like if you're, let's be generous and say you're at 1%. That means that you are probably a factor of 3 or potentially more off from what you should be converting at. And what do you think the impact on that is? That means that your customer acquisition cost is 3 times higher than it should. How many of you guys feel confident that you can afford an acquisition cost that's 3 times higher than it should be? Anyone? Yeah, crickets, exactly. So this is why funnel optimization is important. Also important to note, funnel optimization is a never-ending process, right? You're never going to get to the point where you're going to be able to say, we have the perfect funnel, we have the perfect site, we have the perfect app, we have the perfect lead gen system, right? Because there's always going to be room for improvement. But this is where the Pareto Principle is important, right? You want to strive for that 80-20. Get to the point where you feel confident that you have addressed all of the biggest holes, if you will, in the funnel, all of your leakiest exits. So how do we optimize? So A/B testing, right? So A/B testing, again, is this methodology, and there are tools out there. I think most of you are familiar with them or have used them, but there are tools out there like Optimizely, for example, that essentially have created a framework within which you can test multiple variants, and sometimes people call it A/B testing, sometimes they call it multivariate testing. Again, so this is all sort of semantics, but the difference being that you can run a literal A/B test where you're just testing 2 candidates, one against the other, or you could be running a test where you have multiple elements that you're testing. So it could be an ABC, ABCD test. You have 5 different landing page designs that you want to test. Or you could be testing elements within that page, right? So you may feel confident that your design and layout of the page is great, but maybe you want to see if there's going to be a subtle impact on conversion rate if you change that call to action button from red to blue or red to green, or if you change the call to action itself, the message that's in the button, right? Is it sign up now? Is it get started? Register for free, etc. So with A/B testing, you can look at a whole slew of things, and ultimately the framework that you should be thinking about or you should be employing when you're thinking about what to test is this framework that we like to refer to as AARRR, or Pirate Metrics for Startups, which is a construct that our very own Dave McClure came up with years ago. So this essentially takes your funnel and breaks it down into these 5 discrete steps whose acronym spells out AARRR. So the first step is acquisition. So this is essentially your sign up, your install step with prospective users. The second step is activation, where somebody completes the registration process. Next is retention. So this involves repeat usage of your product or service. You have referrals. So this is word of mouth, when your customers, your users are telling others, their friends or whoever else, about your fantastic product or service. And then you have revenue, which is where the rubber meets the road. Is, okay, you have a great fucking tool, but are people actually willing to pay you for it, right? So there's a big drop off between using something that's free versus using something that's paying or that charges you. So just a very non-exhaustive list of things that you could and should A/B test right here. Okay, so click-through rates, activation rates, session lengths, bounce rates, installs, sign-ups, number of purchases, purchase amounts, open rates, number of invites sent. The latter 2 referring to email. So these are all things that you should and could test that could have a material impact on your conversion rate or the rate at which your leads turn into paying customers. Okay, so that's how we optimize. You have all these ideas now that you want to test, and then the question becomes, well, how do we prioritize? Well, we have these worksheets, and we're going to cover this a little bit later on today in terms of the framework, but the basic process, growth process, involves at some point early on, once you've defined your metrics, once you have a good sense of how you want to grow, what you need to do to grow, you sit down and have a brainstorming session. You come up with a whole boatload of ideas. different hypotheses, things that you could test, that you could experiment with that would potentially move the needle for your business. So once you have this huge, long brainstorm list, then you have to go through and prioritize. And the way you do that is with what we call an ICE framework, right? So ICE, very briefly, stands for impact, confidence, and ease. So these are the three variables that you're going to rate your various brainstorm ideas across. And then you're going to use that aggregate score to as the metric by which you're going to prioritize your ideas. And again, this presentation will be shared. I think actually Chandani already shared it, so you guys don't have to worry about taking pictures or trying to jot down notes. Okay, little pop quiz. If you want to optimize for impact, let's say you have this hypothetical business here. This is your funnel. You have a business where you're selling widgets for $100 a pop. Let's say at the top of your funnel you have 100 million visitors. 10 million of those add your widget to the cart. 1 million of those actually succeed in checking out and completing the purchase. So you're doing a not too shabby business of $100 million, right? That's not too bad. Who wants to have a $100 million business? Raise your hands. Oh, too late. Okay, so let's say you have some options here, right? You're thinking about your A/B testing, your funnel optimization, and you're faced with three scenarios. One, you think your experimental idea could increase the top of your funnel, right? So your number of visitors by 10%. That's not too shabby, right? Two, you have an idea that you feel confident will raise the number of leads adding the product to cart by 10%. Or three, you think you've come up with something that will actually increase the number of customers, the people purchasing, by 10%. So which one of those three ideas would you start with?
Last one.
The last one. Anybody else have a different opinion? No? Yes?
Top.
Top. Okay. Last one. Why do you say the last one?
Because it's going to make the because at the top you're still dealing with people popping out of the funnel. So you're going to make a change. The most efficient dent is when they're going to make that change.
Yes, so exactly. So the point here is that you have drop off through the funnel, right? And so this is a very simplistic hypothetical example. You're seeing 10% drop off at each step. You're going from 100 to 10 to 1. And the hypothetical delta of each of your experiments is 10%, right? So if you can apply a 10% growth in that last step, you're avoiding the previous 10% haircuts of the first two steps, right? So this is very simplistic exercise to get you thinking about leverage, right? And it's not always going to be this clear cut, but you want to think about where you can get the biggest bang for your buck when you're doing funnel optimization. The other thing you need to be mindful of is beware of diminishing returns, right? So this is, again, where the Pareto Principle, 80-20. How many of you guys are familiar with the Pareto Principle? Okay, that's a good portion of the group. If you're not, go read up on it. Wikipedia is your friend, but it's the very basic concept that that you're going to get 80% of the benefit of something from investing 20% of the effort, right? So this is essentially what this gets to, right? And as you think about your funnel optimization hypotheses, things you want to test, you want to start out by focusing on things that are really big, game-changing things. So the previous example that I gave you where you may want to test the impact of the call to action button color, whether it should be red, blue, or green, that may have an impact on your business, but it's going to be really fucking small. Well, what's more likely to have a big impact on your business is a completely radical redesign of your funnel or a very different messaging on your homepage or very different sort of audience that you're targeting with your acquisition efforts, right? So start with the low-hanging fruit, to use the well-worn cliche. Go after things that are likely to move the needle very significantly. And then over time, as you exhaust these big, these big hypotheses, these very different hypotheses, you can then move towards more localized optimizations where you can make smaller tweaks. But these sorts of graphs, are very relevant. It's very easy to rat hole and get really nuanced on, oh, let me tweak that one word in the headline, and that's going to make a huge difference. And more often than not, it doesn't, right? So be mindful of that. Testing pitfalls. So again, here we come back to statistics, our friend. So for any test that you run, you have to be mindful of statistical significance, right? So you have to think about your sample size. You have to think about how long you're running your experiment for. How many of you guys, no shame in raising your hand or not raising your hand, how many of you guys feel comfortable with the concept of statistical significance and how you determine it? Okay, some of you feel comfortable, others don't, okay? Very important, don't waste your time and money coming up with testing ideas, or even worse, executing them if you don't feel really comfortable with statistical significance, okay? Here's a dead giveaway for those of you who are lazy or optimizing. Okay, there are statistical significance calculators out there, right, that you can download for free off of this thing called the internet, and they will allow you to basically put in how many visitors you're getting, whatever the parameters are, and they will tell you, is this a statistically significant sample set or not? But if you have just launched your website and you're excited about the fact that you're getting 100 visitors to your site a week, that's probably not a situation in which you can do A/B testing on your homepage, okay? That's not enough traffic. It will literally take you a long fucking time before you can get a statistically significant result. So that's very important as you think about how you are even setting up your experiments. Make sure you have sufficient traffic, whether you're talking about site traffic, whether you're talking about app downloads, whether you're talking about engagement with your product. And keep in mind the funnel, like in that example, right? At every step, you're talking about a smaller and smaller group. So it's that last step prior to purchase where you're dealing with the most qualified leads, but that's where you're also dealing with the smallest sample of testers, right? Of folks in your system. So depending on what you're testing and how big of an impact you're expecting, that may take you the longest to complete the test, right? Something to be mindful of. Also, you need to think about the confidence interval when you're running these tests. So a lot of the A/B testing tools and the protocols that people will sort of try to convince you that are completely effective and fine will tell you that, oh, just go for 95% confidence interval, you're fine. Yeah, you can do that. I would sort of question whether you're fine. If you want to have really rigorous data that you can feel very comfortable with, I would encourage you to aim for a 99% confidence interval. Okay, this means that it's going to take you longer, potentially significantly longer, to run the test to completion, but it's actually going to be data that's going to be useful as opposed to data that's going to give you a false signal. And this happens all the time in companies. Like, people will run an A/B test and be like, oh, this new homepage design is awesome. It works so much better. They put it out there as their new homepage. Somebody decides to A/B test it 3 months later. Oh, I'm not getting the same results. What's going on? Yeah, it's probably confidence interval issue. Okay, statistics. It's important. The other thing that's relevant for testing here is that you want to do these tests in certain time intervals, right? 7, 14, or 28-day intervals. Why? Because, as I mentioned earlier in the OMTM talk, especially with consumers, you see varying behavior depending on the day of the week. So you may have, like, let's say you're Facebook and you have over 1 billion people engaging with your product every day. It's not going to take you very long to run a test that'll give you a statistically significant result. You could probably get that in, a couple of minutes, if not even a couple of seconds for most things. But that's not going to be really meaningful because of user behavior changes, right? So you want to do these tests on these week-long sprints or intervals to be able to feel confident that you're not artificially selecting for certain types of behavior. Again, aim for big versus incremental wins, right? So don't start out by trying to optimize for the button color, for example. Go for much bigger conceptual questions, right? Like, if you're not sure how you want to position your product, what the best way is to explain it, to describe it to your customers, whether you should have a super long landing page that goes into a lot of detail and educates the user, or go for something that's super short and brief and to the point, that's where you want to start. Like, start testing with very big concepts so you can hone in on the general track. You don't want to optimize for local maxima, is sort of the geek parlance is. And then lastly, don't forget that traffic quality varies by source and scale. Let's say you have a relatively small business or company that you've started. You're getting some traffic, but it's low volume, and you say, you know what, I'm going to start doing paid acquisition to drive more traffic to the site so I can test what messaging is effective. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But keep in mind that the organic traffic that you're getting right now, probably through word of mouth from your existing customers, is going to be very different than the traffic that you're going to get if you go out there and start buying ads on Facebook or YouTube. The latter is going to be much less qualified. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but just be mindful when you're looking at the data. You can't really compare those apples and oranges. You need to try and compare relatively similar traffic. So that's sort of the lecture part of this. And now what I want to do is show you guys some very concrete examples from my previous experience of things that we tested at Hulu and things that we found to be effective, and going into some of the nuance there. So I'm just going to check the time to see where we are. Okay, so just as a brief recap, so I was the customer acquisition lead, the growth lead at Hulu when we launched the Hulu Plus subscription service. For those of you not familiar with Hulu, Hulu's sort of like Netflix, but it's primarily focused around TV shows. So all of this that I'm showing you here happened in 2010, generally between 2010 and 2012. So a very different landscape than it is right now. We had a lot of customers for a free to consumer business, which was basically watch content on the web on your computer for free. Hulu Plus was a paid service that we launched that would allow consumers to watch the content on mobile devices and on connected devices, so being able to watch them in your living room through gaming consoles, smart TVs, etc. And we would charge people, initially it was $9.99 a month and then dropped to $7.99 a month. So this is one of the early examples of our landing page, right? So we were trying to figure out how to articulate the difference between Hulu Plus and Hulu, right? Since we had 25 million or so monthly uniques that were coming to our site to consume the free product, all of a sudden we're asking people to pay us $10 a month for a service that on the surface seemed very similar. We had to try and figure out how to articulate the differences and also how to help people understand, well, what's the difference between this and Netflix, right? Why do I need to be subscribed to Netflix and this? Do I want to be? So we were focusing around the main talking points around the types of content that we had available on the service and the devices that you could use. Here you also notice that we were offering a standard 1-week free trial for everybody. Here in this iteration, we had an email address field that we put up there, trying to capture people's email addresses on the landing page. Why would we do that? Who knows why we would put that email field up there? Yes, guesses?
Because if they drop off, you can send an email to try to bring them back up.
Yeah, exactly. So because they drop off, like again, it's a no-brainer, but something that people sometimes lose sight of, right? So remember, probably over 95% of the traffic entering your funnel will never do what you want them to do, right? And so one of your ways to mitigate that is through email marketing, right? So the closer to the top of the funnel you can capture that email address, the more of an addressable market you have, if you will, to reacquire, right? Like send those people an email, try and get them back and get them to complete the action that you are asking them to take. So this was then the next iteration of our landing page. So you'll notice this is a much simpler and cleaner version of the page, right? Whereas this one we had all of this content here in the lower left-hand corner, right? We're trying to get people to read like multiple sentences about the types of content, and we thought, oh, this is so important, right? We have content in HD, 720p, and we have content from ABC, Fox, and NBC. Like, this is always the challenge, right? You're like, no, there's all this nuance that people need to understand. You know what? Most people don't give a shit, right? So it's a very self-selective situation. So what we realized is we're going to be, what's that?
20% cheaper too.
Yeah, well, yeah. So the change in price was made sort of separate from this. That was driven more by business decisions. But yeah, that certainly factored into conversion rate, having a lower price. But what we ended up gravitating towards, and through testing this was validated, was that a certain portion of the audience got it, right? They understood what streaming was. They understood what we had to offer in terms of content. A picture, like a compelling hero image like this, where you're showing the devices, you're showing the types of content, a lot of people will get it. Those people who don't get it, or who are really want to be very thorough about the research, they could still dig in and find out. Like, it's probably hard to see from where you guys are, but down here at the bottom in the footer, we actually had links to child pages that went into detail about the content or devices, but we realized there's no reason to increase the cognitive load of everybody looking at this page by trying to put all that content up here, and rather just leave it down at the bottom, because we knew people who intuitively, we figured that people who wanted to do their research would sort of look closely at the page and see those links, and people who just wanted to get through it, they're like, oh, what is this? Oh, instantly watch hit TV shows. Oh, this sounds awesome. Oh, cancel anytime. Sweet. Try 1 week free. Awesome. Let's do it. And so, we saw a non-trivial lift in conversion rate because of that, right? So part of it was also the language that we were using, right? So here, our tagline was more TV on more devices. Okay, that wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't great, right? So with this type of work, same as with content marketing in general and email marketing, it's all about the language that you use, right? You need to figure out what are those trigger words that really resonate with people, that help them understand what you're offering. And what we saw, certainly from looking at what Netflix, for example, was doing through their paid acquisition efforts and other companies, was that there's this notion of instantly was a trigger word for people, right? Because it's the right now. I don't have to wait. I don't have to download stuff. This isn't iTunes where I have to wait 30 minutes for that 2-hour movie to download before I can watch it. Instantly watch what? Hit TV shows. Okay, boom. You don't need to tell me anymore. I'm done. Only $7.99 a month. Okay, so we wanted to be upfront with the price. That's something that you may want to consider as well. It doesn't work for every business necessarily, but you need to think about what sort of questions your customers have. You're trying to get people to sign up to give you their email address, give you their payment information. You need to make sure that you've given them enough info in return to answer their main questions, right? I'm not going to put down my credit card for something that I don't know how much it costs. So we were very upfront with that. We also said cancel anytime. Seems somewhat counterintuitive. You're asking me to sign up for something, then you're telling me I can quit anytime. Right? Mixed message? Well, not really, right? Because especially for consumers, this is a point of concern. It's like, are you going to trick me? Are you going to make it impossible for me to cancel? Am I going to have to call you between the hours of 11 p.m. and 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. Pacific time to cancel? So you want to make it easy, and that was always very important at Hulu, right? The user experience, user advocacy was huge. So what you also started doing is segmenting, right? So again, this is something that is very relevant for the Hulu business. It's probably relevant for your business as well. So in addition to a standard sort of default landing page that we're using to drive traffic to sign up for the service, we knew that for us, it came down to the content, right? Like there are people who would be really passionate about certain shows and who we could appeal to directly, right? Like large audiences. And so in this case, Downton Abbey, was a very popular show, certainly at the time. It had a pretty big cult following, if you will. So and it was also one of our better performing shows, meaning that people who would watch that would watch it pretty regularly and consistently and be highly engaged. So we started creating dedicated landing pages for our top 40, I think it was, performing shows. This was one of them. So we would run ads around this particular show, Downton Abbey. You want to make sure that when you're running ads and you're taking people to a landing page, that the messaging is consistent, right? So we had ads for Downton Abbey. We would take people to a Downton Abbey landing page. This was it, again, asking for the email up front, having some information at the bottom, a little bit about what else you can watch and how you watch it. And we decided to be very upfront about our customer service, right? Like putting the phone number up there. Call us if you have any questions. We'd rather have you call us and have us help you over the hump and get you to sign up. Also putting the hours up there, right? Like if you're not offering 24/7 customer service support, tell people when they should call you, when they can actually get a hold of you. And then we also made it fun, right? So this was part of our brand. This is part of our corporate culture. We were a content company by many sort of definitions. We want it to be fun, so here we go. We use the South Park character to incorporate here, right? So these are things that are minor, but they make a difference to people, right? Like it helps to support your brand. It helps you stand out in people's minds. Add a little humor, add a little something interesting, a little flair. Yes, question.
On the first version, it had place version for your email address. On the second version, you had only the button. On the third version, I guess, place for the email and the button.
Yeah, exactly. So these were all different tests. So the question is, why did we have email capture fields on some pages and not others? Very relevant question. Anytime you're asking somebody to take a step or take an action, there will be drop off, right? There will be friction. Somebody will say, "Oh, this sounds interesting. Oh, I don't want to give my email address." So we started with this. We ended up on this page. So keep in mind, this was our standard landing page. If you were coming to our website organically and you're surfing around, saw the Hulu Plus element in our navigation element, this is the page that it would take you to, right? So this was organic traffic that we didn't pay for. We wanted, in this situation, to optimize for conversion rate, right? So we wanted to get as many people to sort of click through and go to the next step. In this instance, this page tied back to a paid acquisition campaign, okay? So this is like one of those rules that you want to keep in mind. When you're paying for traffic, you absolutely want to retain as much of it as possible, right? So when you're doing paid campaigns to landing pages, that's the scenario where I would say, absolutely want to have the email capture field, right? Because you've paid for those customers or those leads essentially to come to your site. You want to take advantage of every opportunity you can to drive them through your funnel, even if that means spending an incremental X number of cents for a follow-up email campaign if they haven't converted. Yes, one more question over here.
Did you track how effective the call and support was, like in general closing new subs?
Yeah, so that is something that we looked at. Customer support was frankly a challenge for us because we were always behind the curve. The business was so large in many ways that it was hard for us to maintain the quality of hiring that we wanted to maintain for customer service agents and sort of meet the quota. And that actually tied back to sort of an ongoing debate that we had for a long time about how upfront we wanted to be about customer support. Did we want to have that information visible to everybody at the risk of having average hold times increase and general customer service satisfaction go down? Or did we only want to surface that information to fewer people under certain specific conditions and be able to maintain high performance standards? So for a long time, the consensus opinion was for the latter, like keep it small. And then this is an illustration of when we sort of tipped the scales and said, you know what? We've caught up with the hiring. We wanted to be more upfront with customer support. And yeah, we were tracking the impact on this, and it was helpful, right? The other thing that I would say with regards to this specific point, if you are a business where you feel like customer support can be helpful in terms of education or any other sort of related considerations pre-sale, but you can't afford to have customer service agents manning a phone line, implement a live chat tool on your site, right? Like implement an intercom or leverage a Zendesk and sort of Zopem type of related tools that allow you to engage in live chat on the site, because those tools can be invaluable. Certainly to provide customer support and service, but also it's a great customer development tool, right? Like this is one of the biggest challenges for companies, getting out of the building, talking to your customers or your prospective customers. And using a tool like this is a great way to be able to engage with people on your site and see what questions they have, see what they understand, what they don't understand, what objections they have to what you're trying to sell them. So it's an ancillary point, but one that I think is important to make. Okay, so very quickly, I was talking to you guys about landing pages. I want to go a little deeper into the funnel and talk to you about registration flows. So this is what the registration flow looked like initially for Hulu Plus. I don't know if you can make it out, and if you can't, then that's sort of the point. This was a very painful, shitty looking page that was designed by very well-intended folks, but folks who had no experience in web form design. Okay, so if you have a business where you are trying to get people to sign up or purchase on your website, or if you're doing anything, frankly, beyond just capturing an email address, I strongly encourage you or the designer or UX person on your team to familiarize yourselves with web form design. There's some great resources out there for that, blogs as well as ebooks about it. And it's something that seems like boring and trivial, but trust me, it is anything but trivial. Like this has a big impact on your conversion rate. So just to break it down for those of you who can't see, this was basically one long page, very small font. We're asking you for personal information and billing information and some additional information that we had to capture related to advertising that we ran on the site. So we needed to capture your birth date and your gender, and then we also decided to add a referral or activation code field here. So again, this may be a challenging exercise, but I'm curious, for those of you who can see the form, what are some things that jump out at you as less than optimal here? Yes, the length, but can you see anything specific that you'd say, well, I probably wouldn't have that in there? Address? Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I'll go through these really quickly, like some of the big offenders. Yes, asking the user to confirm their email address. It's really excessive. I mean, at this point, if you can't type in your email address correctly, you've got bigger problems. Plus, it's also so easy for people to reset their account information based on that. Like, it's really not worth adding an extra field. Same for the password, right? That's arguably a slightly more controversial topic, but again, just one field for email address, one field for password. If they fat finger it, they'll just resubmit, they'll submit a request for help to reset it. The address, yes. What was Hulu again? Were we shipping stuff to you? Oh no, that's right, we weren't. We were allowing you to stream bits online. Why the fuck do you need an address? We're not sending you any gift boxes, okay? So this was, again, well-intended but sort of poorly implemented by folks who didn't understand sort of optimization around payment and billing. The rationale was, oh, our payment processor will charge us lower fees because if we can provide the physical address that goes along with the credit card number, we'll get charged a lower rate. So that's partially true. There are some risk-related elements around credit card fraud that are factored into what your transaction fees are. It's probably much less relevant with Stripe these days. But the fact is that you don't need the address. The zip code is sufficient, right? And if you use a tool like Stripe, for example, you don't even have to worry about it because they'll just tell you, like, here are the fields. Here's like a standard form that you put up on your site, done and done. So we weren't using Stripe. We were doing sort of our own payment stack. But yeah, you don't need address if you're not shipping anything to anybody. Zip code is all you need to validate credit card information. The other thing here is, like, do you notice anything weird about every field? Every field has an asterisk next to it. If everything is mandatory, why do you need to call it out, right? Okay, so. All right, so here we go. Let's see how we can improve this. So we had the luxury and the benefit of setting up a subsidiary in Japan, which is a wholly separate business that was able to run a little leaner than we were here in the US and be able to test some things. And one of the first things that the team there tested was the notion of decoupling the registration flow or splitting up the registration flow and splitting up personal information from payment information. So, people always tell you, oh, you want to have your funnel as short as possible, the fewest steps necessary, because you lose people at every click. And that is largely true, but not always, right? So there are counterintuitive situations in which adding an extra step actually helps you improve overall conversion rate. And this is a key thing that if and when you do funnel optimization on your, on your site, on your business, you want to think about that, right? Like, you may want to add an extra step because it's beneficial for education purposes or otherwise. So what we ended up with as our new flow was something that was arguably simpler and more elegant. So before Hulu Plus launched, we had the ability for people to create regular Hulu accounts, which was sort of very confusing, and most people didn't have a reason for doing so unless you wanted to watch content that was rated NC-17. But we had this weird system where we had this one registration flow for free Hulu accounts, then we had this other registration flow for Hulu Plus, and none of it made sense. So we decided to just streamline the whole thing and realize that the free Hulu account was essentially a subset of a Hulu Plus account. So whenever whenever somebody would go into the registration funnel, this was the new experience that they encountered. So the first page, very nice clear header, create your free Hulu account now, right? Why? Well, you can get personalized recommendations and more, incorporating Facebook sign up, so could make it very sort of streamlined and friction-free. Or, you could go through the old school way of registering. So what did we do here, though? We changed it up. We changed the labels on the fields, and I would actually say that this is, the solution we ended up with is not best practices. So in terms of form fields, ideally what you want to have is the label for the field outside and above the field, right? And the space inside the field, you want to use that for illustrative content, right? So ideally what this would look like is first name, last name would be labels above the respective fields, and within the fields you would say, for example, John Doe. That's just to give people a sense of what you're asking for. Probably you're like, well, why do you need to show people how to type in the name? That's not so helpful, but when it comes to stuff like phone numbers, for example, where there are different formats or syntaxes that you can use, you want to be very explicit about that, right? Like if you are taking phone numbers in a certain format, don't ask people to guess what the format is and then be like, you got it wrong, this is the format, and then have them go back and do it. Just show them the format to begin with, make it easier on them. That's also, by the way, an issue with passwords. Like if you are overzealous and you want like a really strict password, and you're like, oh, it has to be at least 8 letters, but no more than 20, and you need to have a capital letter and a number and a special character. Tell people up front what you want. Don't keep telling them, sorry, format doesn't work, and make them jump through the hoop 6 times, because I can guarantee you, people are going to say, fuck that shit, and bounce. The other thing that we did is we added these sort of confirmation messages that were really sort of fun, right? So, oh, nice to meet you. Email, okay, you'll use this to log in, right? So this is ancillary information that helps sort of validate why you're asking for this information, aligns the user's interest with your own. So we simplified it here: name, email, password. You know, we still couldn't get over the political issue internally around, oh, what if somebody fat fingers their password? So this is the concession. We allowed the password confirmation to stay in here. The other thing that we did here, after much work with our legal team, is notice here at the bottom he said, I agree to the terms of use and privacy policy, checkbox, sign up, right? So this is still a standard thing that a lot of sites do, like you have to click the checkbox. So, you know, this is not legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, but if you have TOS or other sort of legal requirements as part of your registration process, talk to your legal counsel, see if it makes sense for you to just change the presentation of this so you don't require a checkbox, right? And do what we did at Hulu, which is basically said, by clicking create account, you agree to the Hulu terms of use and privacy policy, right? So it's sort of default. The other thing that we did here that was, again, a sort of a subtle UX tweak, but the create account button is grayed out. You can't click it. Why? Because you haven't completed the fields, right? So think about dynamic changes on the form that give the user feedback, let them know when they've completed something, when they haven't. Also, error messages. I don't think I have that in the slide here, but put your error messages in line. Don't do like what most banks do, which is like have a huge long form and then have the error message in 6-point red font at the top of the page. So you get an error, you're like, I don't know where this error is. There's 6 of them, and I have to like go back and forth through the form and figure out where I've screwed up. Like put it in line with the form. Okay, so that was the first step. You put in your personal information. Now you went to the next step. Your free Hulu account was created. So great. By the way, we have this service called Hulu Plus. Here's a little bit more about it, right? You can watch all this great content on all these different devices. Also note the language. Upgrade, right? Like again, this is a very subtle thing, but it plays into the user psychology. Upgrade. Okay, and then look at the call to action, upgrade, to try it for free. Who doesn't want to upgrade, especially when it's for free? It's a no-brainer, right? Make it simple. Again, user experience was very important at Hulu. There were a lot of passionate champions of user experience, right? The focus here was always, we want to get people to what they want to do, which is watch content as quickly as possible. Don't make them jump through a bunch of hoops. So you come to this page, the primary call to action, upgrade, right? Secondary call to action, no thanks, start watching, right? So something to think about as you're doing funnel testing, funnel optimization, whether you're talking about your home page or another page deeper in the funnel, don't ask people to do 6 different things, and don't present 6 different options at the same level, right? Like use information design to create a visual hierarchy of what you want them to do, right? And if you can't decide, oh, do I want people to follow me on Twitter, or do I want them to give me my email address, or do I want them to sign up for my newsletter? You have to figure it out, because people are not going to do all those 3 things, right? Like figure out what's most relevant at any given point in your onboarding process and focus on that, right? It's okay to have a situation like this where you have a primary and a secondary call to action, but you need to visually distinguish, right? That's why these buttons aren't the same color. That's why you have a strong color for your primary and a muted color for your secondary. Okay, so let's say you decide you want to upgrade for free and try this Hulu Plus business. So this was the new payment information form, right? So very simple, decide between credit card or PayPal. Okay, put in the card number, okay, and then put in the expiration date, month, year, security code, and your zip code. Notice we're not even asking you for your name here, right? So this is a bit of a leap. Like we're assuming that the person signing up is also the card holder. Okay, so that's a little bit of a leap. Like some people choose to still put the name field on the payment information form, but what you can do is autofilling, right? So if I put in my name on the previous page, just put in the name here, and if it needs to be a different name, I can change it. But keep it simple. And again, the call to action button at the bottom, start my free 1 week trial, start my free 1 week actually, is grayed out until you fill this out. Calls to action, 1 second. Calls to action, think about the language that you're using, think about positioning it as a benefit and from the user's perspective, right? So start now, try it free, get going, whatever you want to use, think about it from the user's perspective. Here, like what is it that you're doing by completing this? You can start your free trial, right? So use language that motivates the user, that makes it very easy for them to understand why they should take this next step. Also, you can't read it on the screen, I'm pretty sure, but the fine print above the call to action, again, from the user advocacy, user experience perspective, we wanted to be very transparent about what was going on. We didn't want people feeling like, oh, you bait and switched me. You told me I had a 1 week free trial, but then you're going to charge me money. So this language was very explicit, right? After your free 1 week trial, you'll be charged $7.99 per month as a recurring subscription. You can cancel anytime on your account page. So you could even cringe and say, wow, that's way too fucking detailed and explicit. But again, you're being very upfront. A customer can't say, oh, you didn't tell me what was going on. It's like, well, it was there, subtle, but it was there. We told you exactly what was going to happen and when. That it was going to be monthly, it wasn't going to be a one-time charge, et cetera. Yes, question in front.
So to get people to put in a number, I noticed you have the Chase Freedom logo rather than say trustee logo. Is there some kind of corporate arrangement there?
Yeah, so the question is, why did we have a Chase Freedom logo here? So this was our ad sales team. Hulu still today, but for a long time was an ad sale driven revenue model, right? And so our ad sales team had struck a very lucrative deal with Chase as a preferred payment provider. So because of that deal, we had to incorporate their logo into this flow. From a user experience perspective, my very strong preference would obviously have been that we wouldn't have that there because it sort of can be confusing and throw off the user, but the fact was that it drove non-trivial revenue for us, so that's why it's there. Yes?
You went through the become a normal Hulu member and then upgrade.
Yeah.
This is that flow. For your just straight Hulu Plus flow, was it the same kind of thing, but you just didn't include the upgrade? You keep it separate like name and then payment?
Yeah, so the question is around the flow. So just to be clear, this became the one flow, right? We had a one universal registration flow. The first step of that flow would create your free Hulu account. If you wanted to go through and sign up for Hulu Plus, you'd go and complete the second step, right? If you didn't want to sign up for Hulu Plus, if you just created a Hulu account because you wanted to watch, let's say, NC-17 content, or you wanted to get recommendations or be able to use like the bookmarking tool, then on this page, on the second step, you'd say, no thanks, start watching. And you just...
Period the flow.
This was the flow. There was only one flow, right? Like there was no reason for us to have two flows. It was confusing for the user. It was challenging to, from an engineering perspective to keep two flows up. And it was challenging from a data perspective. And that is also something else that I want to bring up. As you're thinking about your onboarding funnel and your flow, be mindful of the impact on analytics, right? Things that are as granular as defining the syntax of your URL structure, what steps are taken, what order then, whether you have different flows for different type of traffic. Be mindful of what that's going to mean if you're doing your funnel analytics, right? If you're going to be looking at the conversion rate for different audiences, right? If you change your funnel around, if you change the order of steps, if you add a different step for a certain traffic source, that's going to add complexity to how you analyze your numbers, right? So fundamentally, you want to keep things as simple as possible so that you can have one funnel, right? If you're looking in Mixpanel or Amplitude, if you want to look at your funnel conversion rates, you want to keep it super simple and be able to compare apples to apples, whether it's traffic source or SKU 1 versus SKU 2, whatever that is. Yes, question in the back.
Two questions. First question is, how many people are happy to do a free trial but not happy to fill in their credit card information? So how large is the drop-off rate there? And second question, how many people actually got upset and said, hey, I only signed up for a free trial and now I got a month for a subscription and I got it?
Okay, so the question was how many people dropped off basically at the payment information page, and how many people contacted customer support upset that they were charged when they thought that it was a free trial. So I'll start with the second question first. Not very many. I don't have the exact number for you, but it was very low because again, we were incredibly explicit. Like I will challenge anybody here to find another site up and running today that's as explicit about what happens and when as we were at Hulu. Arguably, we went too far. Like actually, when I signed up, I was still part of an early cohort, and I still get billing reminder emails from Hulu, which was just insane that we actually did that. But this was our product team, which was very zealous about protecting the user experience, insisted that we send out a notification email in advance of every credit card charge. So you can only imagine what sort of great impact that had on our churn rate when we're like, hey, we're gonna charge you $8 a month. Are you sure you don't wanna cancel? I mean, we might as well have said that, right? So we finally killed that after a lot of back and forth, right? But net, like we were very pro customer. In terms of your first question, what the drop off was, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, and frankly, since this is live stream, it's probably not something I should share. But it was probably within the same range that you would see on any site. Or like anytime you ask people for payment information, you're going to get drop off, right? Like depending on how long your funnel is, what the price point is, et cetera, that'll vary. But you can see 20, 30, 40% drop off potentially on a payment page, depending on your vertical, customers, et cetera. Question way in the back.
Did your lead gen ads market Hulu or Hulu Plus?
Ah, great question. Did our lead gen ads market Hulu or Hulu Plus? Hulu Plus. So Hulu was a free service, and that still existed, by the way, right? So we basically evolved the business from just a free-to-consumer ad-supported business to a freemium model, right? So you could come and watch content for free on Hulu.com. If you wanted to watch it on your iPad, iPhone, in your living room through your Sony PlayStation or through your smart TV, you'd have to sign up for Hulu Plus, and that was sort of the upsell to freemium. But given the economics of the free-to-consumer service, it didn't make any sense for us to do paid acquisition for that. The economics weren't there. And this is partly why, like, even though I joined Hulu at the point where the company was like 3 years in and had 300 plus employees, and I was the first marketing hire because it made no sense for them to do any marketing before that, right? The unit economics didn't support it. So all of our paid acquisition efforts are purely for Hulu Plus. They drove people to a Hulu Plus only funnel, and that was the messaging. Yes, follow up? No, not always. So the question was there always a paid service? No. So for the first 3 years of the business, right? So Hulu launched in 2007. So first 3 years, it was just Hulu.com free, and then we launched Hulu Plus in November of 2010. That's when the paid service started. So okay, question here in front.
You talked about the experimentation around getting the trial period, framing it more using 30 days.
Yes, so great question around the duration of the trial period. So I'm just checking my time. I don't want to go too far over. So the experimentation, honestly, for that was limited, and it was influenced by my previous experience working on the music side, right? So back in the early days, quasi-early days of subscription music, people had experimented with a bunch of different periods, 30 days free, 2 weeks free, 1 week free, and sort of the consensus was that 1 week was pretty much all you needed, right? And we extrapolated from that and leveraged that here. So the considerations were several, right? One, as I think I mentioned earlier, there was a real cost for us. So it was the trial was free to the consumer, but we actually had to incur a cost. Now, the way that our licensing agreements were set up, the content owner, so the major networks, actually agreed to a 1-week free trial. So we were in a position where for the standard free trial, we didn't have to pay any extra, but if we wanted to offer additional free time, that was on our dime. And we did actually do that. So we were doing promotions with different co-marketing partners, and those promotions included varying amounts of time for free, right? So you could have a 2-week free trial, 1 month. We actually did a 3 months free when we did a co-marketing promotion with the folks at Sony. So anybody who was buying, for example, a PS3 would get 3 free months of Hulu Plus. But that accounted for essentially a promotional cost, right? So that was a customer acquisition cost that we were incurring. Now, depending on your business, right, like what is the optimal amount of free, like for your free trial? It depends, right? And it depends really on when the aha moment happens for your customer, right, and what it takes to get there. So with something like streaming video, it was relatively straightforward because it's entertainment. Most people who watch video tend to watch it on a pretty regular basis, probably daily or weekly. If you're talking about a different type of business model, like for example a SaaS tool, it could be something that the user is engaged with on a maybe like once a week basis or once a month. So you need to think about what that user experience is and what it'll take to get to that aha moment, because if it's not something that gets interacted with very frequently, the user might not actually get to that aha moment if your free trial period is too short. So I think there were a few other questions, but I want to breeze through the rest of this because I think we're running late. So let me get through the rest of these, and if I have time for more questions, I'll take them. So this was essentially the end of the sign-up process, right? So this is where most people are like, all right, we're done. Let's crack open a cold one. Let's go and celebrate. We have a new funnel. This fucking rocks. The problem is that you're not really done yet, right? Like this is the first step, getting that customer to sign up. You know, it's definitely not the end of what you're looking to achieve, right? Because now you need to start thinking about engagement and retention. And so what we realized very quickly at Hulu is that since one of the main value props for Hulu Plus was the fact that you could watch it on all these other devices, we wanted you to activate the service on these devices. So you've completed the registration, so this is your confirmation page, right? This is basically, hey, thanks for registering. Welcome to Hulu Plus. Now, set up your devices, right? Set up your TV and other living room devices. So this is a process that unfortunately still exists today. Like if you have Netflix or Hulu or another streaming service, you've probably seen this if you're trying to watch it through a connected device in your living room, that there's this sort of leap that you have to make where you activate the service, and it's sort of awkward. You have to go into some screen setting. You have to take some code that's presented to you and type it in. And so we are trying to reduce the friction there by showing people some screen captures of where they could find the application on their TV or their device and where the activation code field is and what they needed to enter, right? So we were showing that here. We were also, for folks who were interested in getting the app on their tablet or their smartphone, we offered this option of having the link sent directly to them so they wouldn't have to search for it on the App Store. And that was basically just the next step that we incorporated here post-registration, because we knew that we needed to get people to do something as a next step. The other thing that I don't have a screenshot here for is the second element up here at the top is tell friends, right? So referral, and that's something that's probably relevant to all of you guys thinking about when you incorporate a referral system or program into your user experience. So that's something that we played with a little bit at Hulu. It never sort of got enough love and attention as it should have, but we knew that the service was great enough for most people that there was a fair amount of passion and people were telling their friends, and we wanted to, and that's frankly how Hulu grew to begin with, was through word of mouth. And we wanted to capitalize on that for Hulu Plus and sort of lower our average customer acquisition cost. So referral was something that we focused on. Now, you can argue, like, when is the optimal time to get somebody to refer? It's probably after they've had a certain amount of experience with your product. So this probably was not the optimal placement for it, but we wanted to incorporate it here. So that was funnel optimization for the acquisition funnel. But you also have a cancellation funnel. And that's something that you want to think about as well. So I'm going to walk you really quickly through what we had at Hulu. So because the culture at Hulu was so focused on customer advocacy and user experience, we made it crazy simple for you to cancel, as I pointed out earlier on the landing page. You basically would go into your account settings, there was a radio button that you would click, and you were unsubscribed, and that was it. And while that made it very simple, it really made it too simple. And so for a while, we sort of argued and discussed and got to the point where we agreed that it made sense to introduce a little bit of friction, some friendly friction, if you will, into that cancellation flow. And you know, after we accumulated a certain amount of data around churn to understand what it was that was driving people away, we honed in on how we could mitigate some of those issues. So one of the big deals that that was driving people away was, for example, when they're having difficulty registering their devices, their TVs or their Blu-ray players or gaming consoles. Okay, so we realized that we wanted to leverage customer support. We also realized that people who wanted to cancel were annoyed by something obvious, but we are thinking, how can we mitigate that? Okay, so while you can't see it because this is a screenshot, what we did was we employed our crack team of video editors to pull together a 30-second reel of clips from the various shows that we had on the service of characters sort of begging, pleading of please don't go. And I wish I'd saved that video because it really made for a pretty funny montage. But that's basically what you would get when you go to your account screen and hit cancel. You come to this page, that video would autoplay. And the idea there was to try and mitigate the psychology, right? So you're frustrated, you can't find your favorite show, or you can't get your TV to like load it. You're like, fuck this, I'm gonna cancel, these guys suck. You come here, you watch this really funny 30-second clip. It changes your state of mind, right? So now maybe you're more receptive to the notion of, okay, maybe I don't need to cancel. Maybe I can just resolve my problem by calling customer support, right? So this is what we focused on the bottom of the page. Can we help with anything? Here's the support number, here's when we're available. Want a break from Hulu Plus? So this was the other thing that we realized. If you're familiar with network TV, there's a downtime over the summer, right? So there are 3 months during which there's no new content that's being produced. So if you're a consumer paying $8 a month for a service, if there's no new content, you're gonna be like, well, why am I paying for this? And we mitigated that by licensing other content from the UK and other territories that we could roll out in the summertime, but we also recognized that some people would just wanna take a break. Because of that, because they were traveling, going on vacation or whatnot. So we introduced this notion of an account hold, right? So this was a hold that you as the customer could initiate that could last up to 3 months, and it helped mitigate churn, right? Like instead of canceling, you could just put your account on hold. You wouldn't be able to watch the service during that time, but at the end of that period, you'd automatically be rebuilt. So it was great for us because we weren't actually losing a subscriber. Yes?
You give them the option to change how long the pause was?
Yes, so the question is, did consumers have a chance to, did they have the option of controlling how long it was? Yes, so you could pause anywhere from 1 week to 12 weeks. And you could only do it, I believe it was once every 12 months, right? So that's another element that you need to be mindful of, is thinking about how people can, can sort of gamify or can sort of take advantage of features, find loopholes that are not good for your business. So that was one control that we put in. Okay, so let's see, you have these options, but you're determined you want to cancel anyway, this sucks. Okay, so that's the last option, still want to cancel. Okay, well, we're going to ask you to click that check mark to say that you understand the terms of cancellation, that you want to cancel your account, and it's only at that point that, yes, cancel my subscription lights up as a call to action, right? So it's adding friction, but it's not being an asshole about it, right? It's like trying to mitigate what the majority of the concerns were, and then making it a little bit more difficult. So getting people to basically stop and reconsider, do I really want to cancel? Do I need to cancel? Or can I stick around? So let's say you do want to cancel. Oh, well, if you are a great subscriber, right? So customer segmentation, hello. If I've been a subscriber for over 12 months and I want to cancel, boom, special offer, get a free month, stick around. Okay, I'll take it. Or no thanks, I'll continue to cancel. If you continue to cancel, okay, we're sorry to hear you go. Can you tell us why, right? So this is very important. Never miss an opportunity to gather information from your customers, right? Why are you leaving? Are you leaving because of cost? Is it because you're having technical issues? Is it because you don't like the fact that the service still has ads in it? You know, how likely are you to return to the service, right? How likely are you to tell a friend, right? So all of this can be really meaningful data for you as you analyze like what's going on with your business and why customers are churning. And that's the last slide. So one thing I want to do just really quickly, and then I'll wrap up. I want to go back and tell you guys a little bit about the impact of these things because I haven't talked numbers. So the new registration flow that you saw, the net impact on that was an increase of 11% in conversion rate, okay? That, given the volume of business that we were doing, that translated into over $10 million in revenue a quarter, okay? For something that took 9 months to implement because of resource availability and sort of other considerations on the back end with accounting. But so that's an unusual example because Hulu was at a massive at-scale business. Like at that point, we were on a $500 million run rate, right? So that's, you're not going to get to a $10 million nut on funnel optimization for your business necessarily, but it can have a material impact and it also compounds, right? So as you think about experiments that you want to do, things that you want to run, think about experiments that will impact across your entire business as opposed to one particular use case. The changes that we made in the cancellation flow also had a non-trivial impact. There were some other billing related changes that we made, but the net was that we were able to reduce churn by an aggregate 5% or just a little bit over 5% through some of these changes that we made on the churn side. So again, non-trivial changes. So just some examples, some illustrations of funnel optimization. Hopefully this gave you guys some context instead of just hypotheticals. I don't think I have any more time for questions at this point. I think I'm running way behind. But again, Andrei at 500 Startups, feel free to email me or grab me. I'm around today and tomorrow. If you guys want to chat more, I'm happy to chat about this, about metrics or whatever else. Thank you guys.